Hi, I'm Jenny Ray, the Managing Director of Management Consulted, and I'm here today to talk about cold networking. I've got a great story about cold networking. One of my friends who's not in the consulting industry went through the process of cold networking using the same exact methodology that I'm going to talk about today. And when she did that, she was able to get a very high-powered meeting in her field with somebody who, after the third meeting, was preparing to write a check for $100,000 to fund an event that she was doing. And at the meeting, they said, how did we know each other actually? Because in her initial email, she did such a good job of making it appear as though they had a common connection that he felt guilty the entire time that he didn't remember her, when in fact, it was the first time that she had ever contacted him. So what I want you to understand with cold networking is that it's really important to make cold networking feel like it's warm networking. Because if somebody feels like they already know you and they feel like you know them, not in a creepy way, but just in a familiar way, it will leave them questioning whether or not they've actually met you before, and you'll get pretty far down the process of actually making them into a warm contact before they even realize it. So first of all, I'm going to talk about some key guidelines to make cold networking effective, and then I'm going to talk about 2 tools that are really essential in the cold networking process. So here are some of the key guidelines. The first one is use any method necessary for research. What you are looking for is not only the person's name and their email address, which are the 2 most critical pieces, but you also want to know their position, their history, their interests, anything that you can possibly know about them. LinkedIn is definitely a fantastic tool to utilize in order to understand these things. And it's not to bring everything up in your initial email to them. It's to pick something that the 2 of you might have in common and to refer to that in the email. So it's really important that you do a lot of research about someone before you contact them so that you can tailor that initial cold email to them to make it seem as warm and familiar as possible. The second thing is that you want to contact people via email. When you contact them on LinkedIn, they automatically know that you don't know them. So it's really important to contact them directly because that leaves the question open. Wow, I didn't give this person my email. I don't exactly know how they contacted me, but they're contacting me directly to my email box. So I'm going to make the assumption that they have the email for a reason and we should probably be talking to one another. So if you contact them by email, you kind of bridge that barrier and they don't have access to the same amount of information from you that they would have if they were on LinkedIn. So it's really important to keep that straightforward. The third thing is that you want to email somebody twice at most, but oftentimes the second email is going to be the one that will be the most fruitful. So it's beneficial if somebody does write you back after the first email, that's great. You want to wait 1 to 2 weeks in between emails, but if you do give somebody a courtesy follow-up and just say, hey, I sent you an email 2 weeks ago, just wanted to follow up on it. Do you have a chance to have a call sometime in the next week? If you say that, then again, it kind of leaves them pondering, I'm not really sure how I know this person and I'm not sure why I would do a call with them, but I suppose it's worth it to go for it. So there is some strategy in how you approach them and how often you approach them. The next thing that's important is that you want to find a point of connection with them. Like I said, in LinkedIn, when you're doing your research, you want to make sure that you identify, I went to the school, or I'm interested in something. I noticed that you are a orchestra player. You also might just say, I understand that you are the director of recruiting, and you don't need to tell them where your information came from. But if you say something like that, then they'll leave themselves wondering, well, how do you know this? So you never want to say, I found your information on LinkedIn or I was looking you up on Google, but you do want to kind of give some inference to those points of connection. And finally, the 5th and most important thing is that you want to drive the conversation to a call. So when you're cold networking with somebody, there's nothing that they're going to be able to do from you aside from answering a couple of questions unless you have a call with them. If you're able to get them not to answer questions by email, but have a 15 to 30 minute call with you, they're much more likely to determine in that call whether or not they'd be willing to advocate for you. Hopefully they'd be very impressed and really excited about you. And then they'll get really on board with pushing you through the process. If you keep it on email, they'll answer your questions, but they'll never speak up for you inside the firm. So make sure that as you're going through the process, you're driving this to a call. Now, there are 2 tools that are going to be really important for you as you're going through the process. The first is an elevator pitch. You want to make sure that when you open up both your conversation inside the email, talking about who you are and how amazing you are and why they should talk to you, that you're giving them quick, pertinent pieces of detail that will be the ones ones that they would be excited to hear about. Top grades, top schools, top companies that you've worked for, anything that's particularly interesting. And then maybe one or two things that are just a little bit wild. If you traveled around the world and wrote a book, or if you sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, those are two things that I've done. There are things that I would include in my email just to show I'm a totally normal person, or at least abnormal in fun ways. So you want to make sure that as you're highlighting that, you're communicating it. Your elevator pitch is also important to present when you're actually going to the call. So when you're going into an informational interview. So it's important to have the key pieces of your story together that you can present in 30 minutes. Because if somebody has a call with you and they don't know you, that first 30 seconds is a really key proving period. So make sure that when you're going into the informational call, you're making sure that that first 30 seconds, you're able to make a really dramatic impression on them, a favorably dramatic impression. Finally, the second tool that's really helpful is hero stories. And I'm going to talk about these in great detail when we get to our Fit interview series. But basically, hero stories are quick 30-second to 1-minute stories that highlight the benefits that you bring to the table and illustrate them in one key story. So if you're highlighting leadership, you have a story about leadership. If you have a story about impact, you'll have a story about that. And instead of just saying, I do this and I do that in I statements, you're able to say, let me tell you a story about a time when I, and oftentimes in the actual informational interview, if you're able not just to say, I've done this or I've done that, but you're able to say, let me just quickly give you a quick illustration of what I've done. Having your hero stories prepared are really powerful. Hero stories can also fit really well into the introductory email that you send. You might have one hero story about a time that you just saved a company or did something just dramatically impressive. So having one of those in your introductory email could be important. So these are some key guidelines and 2 key tools that are helpful to have in your tool belt when you're thinking about cold networking. Make sure that you expect the best. A lot of consultants are very nice, and you may be surprised at how many of them do actually email back to you and also get excited about promoting you inside the firm. We're excited to talk about even more on networking in future videos. In the meantime, you can check us out at our website at managementconsulted.com.